Yes, Africa, wake up. It's wake up o'clock. Wake up o'clock. A lot is happening. In that time of crying is there, but time of laughter is also there. Yesterday, I said I will talk at length about what Africa was before colonialists came in, before slavery came in. Africa was a great state. It was one country until when the Europeans came and divided and made maps and made demarcations. But today, I want to talk about how the society was made. By the way, in African culture, we used to have education around the fireplace, informal education. That is what the white men taught us to believe. Those who went to Africa, who called Africa a dark continent, but it's a white continent because it has a lot of resources, a reason why the whites or the West. This is not racism. I'm just using the diction white men because they are also black men. So when they went to Africa, they were amazed. First, it sent their explorers like John Speke and others who, before them, there were others who came to Africa and found out that Africa was so rich. Basically, friends, according to universities, and even the university, Macquarie University, I studied in, my first degree was political science. And I read several books on Africa. I want to specifically state one written by M.B.T. He said Africans are notoriously religious. He also explained a lot about how Africa was so organized before the colonialists came in. Africans had their own religion. They had the god of the river, the god of the rain. When there is no rain, they'll go to the desert, to the hills or mountains and pray and dance and cry to God until when the rain falls. And indeed, when they pray for the gods of rain, the rain will fall immediately. When a person cannot deliver a baby, both a man and woman, a wife and husband, they go to traditional medicine persons and they go to the forest and pick all the woods and pick a leaf or a root of a tree. They pound and they give out, and those people will immediately produce children. Africans had all the medicine. By the way, the Stone Age man actually invented fire by squeezing a stick on the rocks, which is there's a hole, and they they squeeze until the fire comes, and they cook with it. Africans used to do a lot of blacksmithing before the Europeans came to Africa. Remember, even in the Bible, Moses, the Israelites were in Africa. They were in Egypt. Slavery. So this tells you how religious Africans were. They did prayers for rain, for crop growth, for everything. They also had telepathic communication. When a person is dead, we hear the birds. We know the bird cry. The message is brought. When a visitor is coming, we see the bees and we know visitors are coming. We had telepathic communication. When you produce twins, they don't kill. Twins, they celebrate. They do a lot of religious cleansing and dances and merrymaking to welcome the newborn. This was the beauty of Africa. That's why you Google MBT wrote, Africans are notoriously religious. Everything was religious until when the colonialists came to colonize Africa and partition Africa. Anything Africa was made black and dark. All the religion was stopped. All, of course, others are bad, but those who heal, they were not witchcraft. They are medicine people. Like my grandmother used to heal impotent people. That is Africa for you. They pray their God, and their God is Almighty, not any other God. I must tell you that according to Africans, the scholars of African history, they say Africa was so organized with the social structure. The culture was like this. I read a lot of books and I discovered Africa was great. According to anthropologists who studied African history, say colonialism had, Africans before colonialism had kingdoms which were very, very large. Very, very large. And they had proper language, and that helped them to conduct trade, which I'll come in later. Of course, we had Mali, Congo, Benin. They were large kingdoms and dynasties. Of course, we had others, the Bachueses, the Luo, the Igbo, and so on. Of course, the Igbos belong to the Mali, Benin, and so on, because they're everywhere, even in Nigeria, they're the majority there. So basically, Africa was so organized. This led to what I call Trans Saharan trade. Trans Saharan trade was a trade that linked the Mediterranean or Mediterranean worlds, Arab worlds, and Africa together. They had a very lucrative and productive trade called Trans Saharan trade or gold salt trade, because Africa had a lot of gold. They traded in salt and gold. Africans got salt from Arabia, and then Britain and so on, the Mediterranean people, while Africans gave out their gold for salt and other ingredients, that spices, their food, their spice, and so on. Things like perfume from the West. Little did Africans know that this will expose them to the Western world and Arabs. They took advantage of the trade that was in 13 something, in the 12th century or the 11th century, long time before the colonialists came in 1884. That is when Bismarck clearly saw, because the British were so disorganized. Of course, even the Portuguese came to Africa. They were fighting for resources in Africa. And Bismarck saw it as a bad image for the Europeans to fight in a foreign land. They were fighting for resources. Remember, people like Leopold, King Leopold, had Congo in his hands. And of course, Kenya taken by British, Uganda, Sudan, and so on. They were British. That is, we had also French, they call them Francophone, those who were ruled by the French. And in East Africa and others, we call them Anglophone, those under the white men, under the British or other part of the world. And the Portuguese had their own territories. But when Bismarck of Britain, a great man, saw war among these people because of resources, he called them back to Europe. And they sat in the Berlin Conference in 1884 in Germany. And from there, they agreed to divide Africa among themselves. By the way, Leopold did a lot of havoc on Congolese. He cut off their hands, their ears, their mouth, their noses, because if you fail to pay taxes, your mouth and hands are cut. They call it lettre de cachet. I'm not good in French, but that's the word they used to use a lot. So they went to Berlin Conference. They gave themselves countries. They divided Africa among themselves. the British, the Anglophone, the Francophone, no French would go to attack the British. They were able to steal African resources so much. America was not part of colonialism, though later they participated in slavery. By the way, it was not much of their fault. They didn't go to Africa to fight. Incidentally, there was slave trade. The Arabs who participated in Trans Sahara trade saw the wealth of Africa, saw the great people and hardworking men and women, young people. Over 2 million were taken off, and these Arabs would go to borders. Most countries had slave market. In Gulu, Uganda, we had a slave market in particular. The Arabs would sell the slaves to the Americans, and they would buy in big numbers, and many, over 2 million, were taken across the sea, brought here in America, and they suffered a lot. They had no rights. They were used in plantations. They made the roads and everything before civilization here, because the first civilization started in Africa. So those are some of the facts that is important for us to know before we go into real discussion on which way forward for Africa, which kind of democracy or leadership Africans must take. So there's a lot to discuss on Africa. I want you to go and read the ideas of how they call what historians on Africa. They have a lot about Africa. Also, MBT has done a lot. There are many guys who did a lot of work on Africa. By the way, the Trans Sahara trade helped to sell ideas, culture, and language. So, because of that, the Arabs smell something, and they were able to get African for slave or slavery. In conclusion, I say, please, if you have not yet subscribed, do it. Share, like, but again, give you idea on what I've said. And of course, we see how we can move on. Basically, today's proverb, every day I'll be giving proverbs in the end. Today's proverbs is from Uganda. It says, until when the lion learns to tell its stories, the hunters will always take the credit. Until the lions learn to tell their stories, the hunters will always take the credit. Of course, we know lions are brave, they kill, but of course, we also kill lions because in Genesis, in the Bible, they taught us we have to dominate the world. and lions are under us. Thank you. God bless.